Hello, my friends. So I'm here with a video about if statements in Java. So this is a really exciting topic because we're going to learn how to actually put logic inside our code. And if statements are something that we'll see all the time throughout every computer program we use the rest of the year. But also, I think in thinking about how do we program kind of real life devices, things. If something happens, then you do something else. So if you push the button on the side of your phone, the volume goes up. If you tap the home screen button, the screen turns on. If you tap in a certain box, the keyboard shows up. If you tap on this certain place, a J shows up. Even in video games, right? If you hit the space button, your character jumps. If you hit the start button on the microwave, it turns on a circuit. So this kind of logic shows up all throughout life in any kind of application with computers. So let's get started. So we're going to today talk about just something. So basically, the general structure of an if statement is like this. No, geez. The general structure looks like this. You have if, and then if something is true, and you put that condition in parentheses, you do not put a semicolon after that line, and then you open another set of brackets for that if. And then if that something is true, then you execute all the code inside the squigglies. So everything inside this bracket. So let's say we ask the user to type in a number. So sys.out.println, what is your favorite number? Okay, and then we're going to have them type it in and save it as an integer and all that stuff. And what if we want to say if they type in a positive number? If that number is positive, so if it's bigger than 0, we'll just tell them you typed in a positive number. Okay, so I want to look at the structure of this, right? So I said if, and then here's my parentheses. So the condition goes in the parentheses. And then basically what happens is, if that condition is true, this code will run. Okay. So if that number is a positive number, it'll go through here and print this out. And if not, it just won't. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this code. Notice again, everything's going to go within another set of squigglies in addition to the one for the class and the public side void main. So if you type in a positive number, it does that. If you type in a non-positive number, nothing happens, right? If the condition is false, nothing. If the condition is false, it skips the code in squiggly. So if you have a bunch of code in here, it will all get skipped. Okay. And of course, you can compare variables to each other or to numbers or whatever. So for example, say you have like a char. So char, your grade. Let's say you have an A because, I don't know, you're like a good student or whatever. So you can say if that grade is an A. Okay. Now, one interesting thing here is I did a double equal sign for the comparison. And that's not a typo, that is on purpose. And the one equals is how we set a variable. A double equals is how you compare. So double equals is to compare if something is equal. The single equals is for setting a variable. So I think that's an important distinction. Unfortunately, it'll actually let you compile if it's an equal sign, but it'll just work wrong, which is really stupid. So if your grade is an A, well then we could do multiple lines of code. So we could say like psych, and then we can change your grade to be a D. And again, notice the single equals for set, and then we can go ahead and print out their grade. Okay. And you can see, even if you like make a change inside the squigglies, because we declared this variable out here, this changes it to a D. And then after that happens, we'll see that it actually does stay as a D. So the change does actually happen and is a permanent change. So this permanently changes the variable even outside the if. Okay, so that's kind of an interesting thing. That's the basics of if statements. Now, what if you wanted to do something else? So if it's a positive number, do something. Otherwise, do something else. Okay, and for that, we actually have something called an else statement. Okay, so an else statement will always happen after an if statement. Well, actually, it doesn't need to happen. An if statement may happen after an if statement. And basically what happens is, if your code does not go through the if directly above it, it will go through the else. So in this case, I had this if x is bigger than 0, and then I just do else. And notice I don't have anything in parentheses, because it's basically like a catch-all. It's just going to say, if you didn't go through this if statement, then do this, no matter what. There's no other condition. If your x is not greater than 0, it will automatically go through this else. So we could put something in here and just say, like, your number is not positive. Okay, so that's the general setup there. And as we'll see, we'll go ahead and run this code. So if I type in, again, a positive number 5, I typed in a positive, it skips this completely. But if I type in something that is not bigger than 0, so say I type in -8. So when I do -8, it goes down here in my code. It says, is -8 bigger than 0? No. So it skips over this if statement. Then it gets to the else. Well, it didn't go through the if statement directly above it. So it automatically goes through here, excuse me, and prints out this code, executes everything within it. So that's the setup for an else. Again, you don't need to do an else statement. It's just if you want something to happen or something else, and one of those has to happen, that's what an else statement will be very good for. It'll automatically it must go through one or the other. Okay. Now, what if you wanted to have multiple cases? What if you want to say, like, okay, if your grade's above 90, then you have an A. If your grade's above 80, then you have a B. Otherwise, something else. So if you have two cases, if there are only two possibilities, then if else is good. If you want multiple cases, that's where you could use something called an else if. So if you have more than two cases, you can use else if. So the structure is like if, and then else if, and then else if, and then if you want, it's always optional, you can add an else at the end. Okay. And these have to kind of be strung together. And the general situation here is it will only go through one of these. Okay. So if I say, like, I don't know, let's come up with another number. Double decimal equals, let's say your GPA. Your GPA, and we'll just say you're like a grade student, is 4.7. So we could say if your GPA is bigger than 4.7. Okay, if your GPA is bigger than 4.7, then in this case, so I can say if your GPA is bigger than 4.7, then we'll say, okay, your GPA is tremendous. Okay. But, hey, you know, if you're above 3.0, you're doing okay overall. So if your GPA is larger than 3.0, then we can print out your GPA is decent. Okay. And then again, we'll have another set of squigglies for each of my ifs and my else ifs and my elses. Now then we'll have an else here. And then your other case is uh-oh. And again, I can put as many lines of code as I want in here. You know, I can put like multiple print lines. I can set up other things, that kind of thing. So your GPA is tremendous, or on a roll or something. And again, it's only going to go through one of these. Okay, so if your GPA is, say, let's say if your GPA is like above 4, it's like pretty tremendous actually. So 4.7, when I run this code, let's skip past the first part again. 4.7 is bigger than 4, so it runs through this if. And because it ran through this if, it skips over the rest of these. It skips over all the else ifs and elses. So if it goes through here, it skips the rest of the else ifs, elses. If you switch your GPA to, say, 3.7, and let's run this code and see what happens here. I'll type in a 3 for the other thing. So if you say through 33.7, that's my bad. Oh, I see what I did. Okay, so 3.7 here, that is not bigger than 4.0, so it continues on. Is it bigger than 3.0? Yes. So it goes through this else if, and then it does not go through the else. Okay, so one question you might be having is, could I put an if statement inside an if statement or inside an else if statement? And of course the answer to that is yes, of course you can. So you can put an if inside an if. You can put an if and an if and an if. There's no limit to these. You can chain them as much as you like. But you can also put an if in an if. So let me show you what that might look like. You might say if your GPA, let's say, is bigger than 3.8, you could say like, you are close. You're getting very close. And again, that's unrelated to the outside if, else ifs, and elses. Like this if is not related to this one because it's inside the else if. Like this else is related to the else if that's right above it and the if that's right above that. So that's kind of the structure. But we'll see that if we change our GPA, say to 3.9, and we run our code then. Now it says, okay, 3.9 is bigger than 3, so it goes through here. It's also bigger than 3.8, so it goes through here. And again, it went through either the if or the else if. It went through that, so it doesn't go to these. Now, if we change your GPA to be like not so good, what you're going to find out is that it goes through the else, of course, just like you might expect, right? So skip the first one again. So if your GPA is 0.9, is that bigger than 4.0? No. Is it bigger than 3.0? No. So it goes through the else. So this only happens if it goes through none of the if, else ifs. So the general structure here is it just kind of waits until it gets through one of them, whichever one that is, and then it skips over all the rest. Okay, so that might be useful for a case like that. What else is I gonna say? Okay. Oh, one thing you could do, this is like a bad idea. I don't recommend this, but if you only have one line in your if, you don't actually need the squigglies. So you could say like if your GPA is exactly equal to 4.9, and then without squigglies, you could just like tab over and say like wowee. Like this will compile. I don't recommend this. This is going to cause errors later. Or not errors, but it'll cause confusion later. So like nothing happened, obviously, because the GPA is not 4.9, because that's like pretty close to impossible. But that's the setup. I don't recommend this again, but you will see it sometimes when you're looking at other people's code. So not recommended, can be confusing. Okay, so that was the main thing I want to talk about. I have a little more. I'll go ahead and put that in the next video. As always, send me any questions you have. Thanks for watching.